I now recognize Mr. Kuda for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to yield my time to Mr. Raskin.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I appreciate the comments of Mr. Garcia, who reminds us that the closures began under the Trump administration. At the same time, actually, that President Trump was aggressively defending the Chinese government and praising President Xi for his wonderful and speedy response to the coronavirus. And we have more than 20 statements in which President Trump praised the Chinese government and their cooperation and his effective work with China. But back to you, Professor Schwartzman. We established that in the Oregon versus Smith case, the Supreme Court upheld the ban on peyote use, even though it did selectively burden the religious practice of adherents of the Native American religion, because it was a general ban that applied to everybody. It only really hurt one religion, but it was something that applied to everybody. In the court, Justice Scalia actually said that the test of a free exercise violation is whether it's part of a neutral, universally applicable law, or whether it's adopted for the purposes of interfering with someone's worship and religious practice. The counterpoint case is the Church of Lukumi Babalu I case, where there was an ordinance in Florida that was gerrymandered to target the Santeria religion and their live slaughter of animals, saying, well, if slaughter of animals is bad, it should apply across the board, including in supermarkets, on farms, and so on. But this is just targeted at this particular church. So in order to clarify what's going on with COVID-19, we need to look at what the character of the different laws are. If a law said that people could not gather in groups of more than 15, and it applied to theaters, coliseums, weddings, funerals, church and synagogue and mosque services, political rallies, newspaper floors, factory floors, football and baseball games, would that violate the free exercise of religion?
I think as the Supreme Court interpreted the First Amendment in Employment Division versus Smith, the peyote case that you mentioned, and in Lukumi, a law of that kind would not violate the First Amendment because it would be neutral and generally applicable.
Okay, and if a jurisdiction adopted a law that was just targeted at churches, saying that you can't gather in groups of more than 15 in churches or synagogues or mosques, but it doesn't talk about football games, baseball games, factory floors, theaters, coliseums, other public events, would that violate the free exercise of religion?
Yes, that would clearly fall under the standard that the court adopted in Lukumi, and it would be discriminatory.
Okay, so viewed charitably at its very best, the purpose of this hearing is just to underscore what the Constitution already dictates, which is that governments in their pursuit of public health cannot selectively target churches for regulation, but have to make neutral, universally applicable public health regulations. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and if there are any that appear to be selectively targeted at religion, those have been struck down or should be struck down. Would you agree with that?
I would.
Okay, so what are we really doing here? Well, we're here to state a truism about the Constitution, and then somehow to try to impugn the Biden administration, which, as my colleagues have pointed out, inherited the nightmare and catastrophe of COVID-19 from Donald Trump. His own COVID-19 advisor, Deborah Birx, has said we've lost hundreds of thousands of people in our country because of the reckless mismanagement of the pandemic when it first started by Donald Trump, who was living in an absolute fairy tale world, saying that it would disappear by Easter, it would magically go away overnight, everybody should just take hydroxychloroquine, inject yourself with bleach. I mean, it's hard to recapture the lunacy of that period. But that's how it all began. And I'm just amazed that our colleagues would think even to have a hearing and bring this up when it stands as such an embarrassment and debacle and disgrace in terms of the last presidential administration. And it is the Biden administration which finally got in control of COVID-19 and has allowed us to take off the masks and end the distancing and send the kids back to school, which the whole country, of course, wanted. But they would prefer to polarize it and divide the country over these matters. I yield back to the chairman.